of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD. I got nothing.
Calm down. I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective, yes, but an erratic detective is Mickey Rodriguez.
Why an African supping in young? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
You apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there. Pleasant Monday evening to you. It's the beginning of the week. Wherever you are, good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. On the console with me is our regular co-host, Leonard Craig. We have in our studio this evening someone who has never turned us down to be our guest. Whether you like him or not, whether you like his politics or not, he has been around a long time, and he is one of Guyana's most experienced person in the area of Guyana's sociology, Guyana's politics, and of course he has his expertise in local government. I don't think he will have objections if I say that he's also one of Guyana's controversial, prominent citizens. Sitting in what Leonard Gildari calls the hot seat is Vincent Alexander. Vincent, thanks for being here, and you would know Leonard Craig.
Thank you, Freddie. Yes,
okay. Sir. Vincent, I saw a social media program with you in which the David Hines vocabulary or his controversial, ethnically laced statement was made. And you tend to agree with him. And I remember you were saying David was speaking to a specific character. When I heard you say that, I was wondering if you were talking about Bond and Craig. So with that remark, I'll hand over to Leonard Craig.
Yeah. Well, I haven't ever made any public comment about Craig. There has never been someone to whom I have paid that kind of attention. So no comment I made was about Craig.
But David Hines' comment was about Craig and James Bond.
I commented about Bond.
You commented about Bond?
Yes, I'm in no position. I don't know Craig sufficiently to make any such.
Well, we're not asking you about Craig. We're asking you about David Hines. I better let Craig speak for himself.
No, you putting me in the hot seat now. No, I think just to clarify what Freddie is asking first, that you seem to have defended David Hines' statement, and then you made a statement that you understand what Hines is saying because he's speaking of a particular character trait. And he made specific reference, as you were saying, you were referring to Bond. Can you clarify why you find such a statement defensible and why you find a character trait is necessary for or to invoke such commentary?
All right, two things. My reference was in relation to Bond. That's the first thing I want to say. secondly, Freddie introduced me here, giving me an accolade, which I will use, being sociologist.
Mm-hmm.
I have been as the chairman of the International Decade for the People of African Descent of Central Ghana. I have been paying a lot of attention to the African person from a psychological and sociological perspective. One of the things that we have not paid attention to is the fact that people of African descent are affected by a post-slavery traumatic syndrome. A post-slavery traumatic syndrome. This is not something that you may be conscious of, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And when people experience trauma, there are various responses to that trauma. They don't themselves articulate that they're responding to a trauma, but once they experience the trauma, it's human nature to respond, to find a way to deal with whatever situation you're confronted with. And therefore, relating that to the question at hand, I think that Bond, and probably people like Bond,
people like Bond would be like
and probably people like Bond. I can't say Craig, I don't know much about Craig to say that, have been traumatized. They have been traumatized. Whether Bond would admit it or not, what happened after 2020, being charged and all of that, he is a traumatized person. And people respond to trauma in various ways. And I would be bold enough to say that, in my view, Bond's political maneuvers are a response to his trauma. He is seeking to overcome the trauma by his political maneuvers. But as he does that, he has been, and objectively continues to be, a member of a community. And the manner in which he's responding to his trauma, in many regards, is turning his back on and attributing things to his community that can bring one to the conclusion that he's doing things which are negative in relation to his community in response to his trauma. And so some of these descriptions that Heinz would have used, I would not use the terms that Heinz would have used, but certainly I would conceptualize the situation of Bond in a manner that would cause me to understand the term used by Heinz. Because what Bond would have done in response to his trauma has a positive for him, in that it relieves him of some of the consequences of what caused the trauma, but it has a negative for the community, because he subtracts from the community by now asserting and attributing to the community things that are not in the best interest of the community, like descriptions of people in the community and things like that. And so that is the context in which I would address the issue of Heinz. Now, Heinz himself may be traumatized, and traumatized by Bond's behavior. And so he too may be responding to trauma.
Do you have specifics where you refer to as Bond subtracting from the community? What kind of, you got specifics you have in mind you want to share?
His politics, his current politics, and what he's attributing
to
the people who are not involved in his politics at this point in time.
But what has he said?
You know,
what has he
for
said?
example,
give an example. Right.
For example, I have listened to Bond, and I have heard Bond referring to the president as a good guy.
The current president.
Yes, the current president. A good guy, a guy who thinks means well and all of that. He's making that reference to a president who went to the African-Guyanese community in Macarthur and told them a number of things. He told them, for example, that he has no interest in interacting with the leadership of the Neighborhood Democratic Council. He's coming directly to speak to the people, which is a breach of the spirit and the principles in our Constitution. He told the people of Macarthur that he was bringing progress to Macarthur. He had gone to declare a road open at one time. And that the road, now called Heroes Highway, was being built. And as a consequence of the building of that road, the values of the property adjacent to the road will go up, which is a benefit to be derived by those people in Macarthur. And he told me that too. He said that publicly, and he told me that too, that when I once spoke with him, seeking a meeting which he agreed to and never granted, that he was doing things, and that one of the things he was doing was building this highway. It's passing through Macarthur. And those people who have property there adjacent to the road will benefit. And lo and behold, people were bulldozed. And quite the opposite is now being said. And here's Bond uplifting this guy. Bond uplifting this guy and suggesting that, the people who are affected, like the people of Macarthur, that they're in the wrong, and things like that. So yes, I have examples.
Oh, okay.
But that's one example of Bond saying something in favor of the government. You did say in your introductory remarks, but you did say in response, that he belongs to a community.
That's a traumatic moment.
But have you
the community?
But you can okay. You could extrapolate from that which you were doing and say Bond has harmed the African community. You could extrapolate. But can you point to something in which Bond say, them people, then what, this, that? Have you got a statement that you can quote
so
in which Bond is saying something negative about?
On one hand, I have shown you his behavior in response to trauma, which impacts him positively, because now he's, we need to see what's going to happen with the court.
No, but you still didn't answer.
I'm coming. Don't rush me, right? Now, I can't give you I'm not going to quote what Bond has said, but Bond has said things in this last period about people in the People's National Congress, which are.
But there's not a part. There's a party.
No,
not
but
a national
the
people, not a national
the
ethnic
people
community.
whom he spoke about are people of the ethnic community.
But if he's speaking about,
separate and apart from the fact that
that is not
all or most
a race,
most of us, when we talk about the People's National Congress, whether insidiously or otherwise, tend to be speaking about people of African descent.
There's a big acrobatic jump there, Leonard Craig.
Yeah,
probably gymnastics.
Surely. What I have a difficulty with, or I shouldn't say that.
How could innocent African people in Guyana, you delegate them because you criticize some people in the PNC? No.
I haven't delegated anybody. I'm saying they were dead.
No, you saying somebody delegated. Somebody put some lash on the PNC because they're seen as African.
Not the PNC
by
per
extrapolation, you're criticizing the African race.
Not the PNC.
No, I credit you with much more.
They put lash
intellectual
and attributed certain things to people in the PNC of African.
What they got to do with African people?
Let me ask you this question quickly. The perspective you are making known today, does that only apply to people of African descent?
the issue of trauma that I have spoken about could apply to any person or to any group.
Or to any group.
Could apply to any person. Any group.
So, if James Bond or people like him criticize the East Indian members of the PNC, does that apply to subtracting from the community, and does that apply to your theory?
First of all, let us remember that we're talking about a situation of trauma, right?
That's your theory, of course.
Situation of trauma.
We'll come to that,
right? So that's the first thing I want to say. It could be said that people of Indian descent, in trying to overcome their trauma, may have found solace in the PNC as well. Trauma is...
This is a theory that explains everything, but for me, it explains nothing. The theory of trauma. I will come to, because I think that theory is very insulting to African.
No, this is not a theory about. It's not about. It's not about.
You
African
said
people.
African people.
No, because we're
are suffering from a post-slavery trauma.
Oh, certainly.
Certainly,
and I am not the originator of that theory.
Are you telling me that over 200 years, the dialectics, the civilization changes in the world have not diluted that trauma? So African people will permanently live with a trauma? I don't want to cut.
Let me respond to that right away.
No, man. There's
a term that Craig used. Incidentally, that's Swahili, mambo jambo. It's a term that Craig used just now in asking me the question, which explains and responds to what you say. You know, when people are affected by something, then they respond to it. And if it's something that can become generational, that trauma is reflected in the way in which one generation deals with another generation, and passes it on in various ways. It starts off being described in relation to that group of people as a trait. It becomes a trait, its response.
And that trait becomes permanent.
Becomes a trait. There's a lot of study going on now to show that things which over generations trait virtually become a part of your DNA. You're
treading very close on genetic determinism. There is something called nurture versus nature. I think you better be careful. You are saying ethnic groups have certain negative genetic traits. That theory has been debunked.
No, two things.
Years and years ago. No, be careful.
I am saying that
I think I credit you with much more intellectual.
Any group can have.
Can have. That's different from the determinism you're speaking about.
Any group can have.
Can have means you cannot have also.
Right, but let me say this. Let me go further. Because I'm speaking here about the people of African descent. And I'm not speaking about them in any derogatory way.
You may not know you're doing
one of the traumas the people of African descent have experienced, the collective, was what happened in the village movement, the way in which the villages were.
Who doesn't know that?
No. It's not I'm explaining something.
East Indian school children know about what African went through. Why are you permanently assigning that to them?
Let me finish. It is what happened to them. But that's not the issue that I'm raising. I'm demonstrating something. So what did they do? And that was traumatic. That was a trauma. What did they do in response to that trauma? In response to that trauma, where their villages were devastated and things like that, they turned to seeking of employment for economic stability. You get employment, you get a job, not like if you're farming and you produce.
You coming up to the point?
I'm making the point. Allow me to make the point. So they went into this habit now of seeking jobs, and job seeking has almost become a trait to the people of African descent. And I'm talking about Guyana, because a trauma is specific to a particular group in a particular place.
No, you said post-slavery. Trauma. So that would go for Africans in the New World. That would go for Africans in the New World.
You have post-slavery trauma in general.
And they particularize it in different countries.
Yes. In different circumstances. Yes.
And
yes.
Which is the particular trauma for Guyanese Africans?
But no, I just, you don't want me to Freddie. I tell you that the trouble they had, I was talking about what happened to the village movement. And I'm also talking about the response to the trauma, where they went seeking jobs. That's a response to trauma, to overcome the trauma. And so in the African community, you virtually are brought up being told that, you must get educated so you can get a good job. Nobody sees that in the context, necessarily consciously in the context I'm putting it in. But it is and can be contextualized as a response to a traumatic experience, historically. And so here is it, this occurred, and you mentioned it 200-300 years ago, but that trait of the African Guyanese has been passed on from generation to generation.
And nothing has intervened.
And hold a moment.
Generationally wise.
Generation to generation.
To dissolve that?
Well, Freddie, you're living in Guyana.
No.
Is it true that the people of African descent, not only do they, to a large extent, seek to be employed, but also they are now deemed to be the ones who have dominated the public service.
You haven't been doing your statistics. There have been no period except the past 5 years when so much young entrepreneurial blacks have emerged. No other period.
No. I am not denying that has happened, but that is.
I don't want to lose a Swahili term. So I would use another term. There is this nonsense, man. This theoretical nonsense.
So let me complete the point.
Okay.
So that this tendency in the African Guyanese community to go towards education, employment, etc. I'm saying that given the studies which are now being done in psychology and things like that, can virtually be associated with the DNA, having started off as a trait.
I think you have no idea what you're saying. You're going to get into trouble.
All right.
The kind of trouble I wish to handle.
You can't handle that because you're not a genetic biologist.
I don't have to be. You don't have to be.
What I extrapolate from what you're saying, right, is that politically, Africans should permanently support the PNC.
I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about that at all.
Yeah, because you refer to...
No, don't take me there.
All right. Hold on. Here, why I extrapolated that.
Oh, you're extrapolating.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
Extrapolating too?
No. So because I asked you the question about East Indians inside the PNC who were criticized by people like Bond, because you refer to Bond and people like him. And you said they themselves may have been traumatized and find solace in the PNC. And for somebody of East Indian descent to have to find solace out of trauma in the PNC means that they don't belong there.
Why?
There's no logic in that.
Yes, there's logic. What has drove them to the PNC is trauma. This is what you say.
As you say,
yes. Which means they didn't go there on their own psychological healthiness.
And what drove James Bond?
When they were in a psychological state. I'm not going to be 40s.
What drove Bond to the PPP?
It's his trauma.
It's trauma. It means he does not belong there.
It's a manifestation of post-slavery trauma.
It's a manifestation of
trauma. You started with that.
So associate with East India.
I am saying, you guys are so confused.
Okay.
I have given a general theory about trauma.
Uh-huh.
That theory can then be applied, right, to particular situations and circumstances. And I've sought to apply that theory to Bond. I have particularized the case. So Bond cannot be simply said to have a post-slavery, and something that every African Guyanese has experienced in the particular instance.
Look back at the program. You started Bond by saying, to understand Bond.
Yes, you have to understand the post-slavery. Definitely. I still contend that that's the case. Because that is theoretical postulation upon which the particularization has been done.
So,
well, I'll be damned.
Look. No.
I'll be damned.
No, seriously. I mean,
I'll be damned.
I don't know at this point if to take what you have said seriously.
That's up to you.
Or if, because
that's up to you.
But we could
you are clearly
rejecting you thing with empirical
you are clearly going down one line, and when confronted with other perspective on it, you're denying that you're not going down that line. And that is what I can't understand.
What have I denied?
No, because okay, you're saying
he asked him what has he denied.
You are saying that James Bond, because we're being specific now.
Yes.
James Bond, in response to trauma, has bolted to the PPP.
Yes.
And in so doing, he has hurt his community. And you are referring...
His community is not merely going to the PPP. So don't get me.
And the community you're referring to are Africans.
Hurtness community is not merely going to the PPP. Hurtness community is what is attributed as that which has attracted him to the community, attracted him to the PPP. And other comments he's made about the community, which he
we asked you about that before. We asked you to cite that before.
I cited.
You cited his positive qualities of President Ali, and then you say how we could say this about the man that did ABC.
Let me say this now. Let me say this.
There are things that I couldn't quote, but I do have a recollection of negative things he has said.
All right.
About African Guyanese.
And I mentioned
about the community.
About the community, and I mentioned
by community you mean African Guyanese.
Yes. African Guyanese. In this instance, they happen to be in the
PNC leadership.
No man, you're mixing up two. Oh my God!
Several things you're mixing.
Man, you're mixing up, man.
I haven't changed what I said.
Vincent, I've known you donkey years. We're about the same age. I have never denied you an analytical mind, but this is going amorphously, man. This is going amorphously.
I've probably grown beyond what you're accustomed to.
No, I'm accustomed. How could you talk about sociological traits over 300 years becoming part of people's DNA? There could be dialectical forces that kill those armor.
It is the dialectical forces that cause the kind of response.
No.
It's the dialectical forces.
Dialectical forces can erase them.
It could erase them. It could enhance
nobody got any big thing against homosexuality in the world today. Look, Vincent, you're the guest. I don't want to take up your time.
Look, so there are a couple of things you said I'm still struggling with.
I think he has confused me too.
That I'm still struggling with here. Right?
Well, anybody could confuse anybody by talking. Okay.
Look,
mysterious.
I don't want to conduct a savage interview with you. All right, because you're going down the line.
No, if you conduct a savage interview,
we have to protect
I will either not subject myself to savage treatment.
No, you have to wait
or give savage responses.
No. Okay. Apart from you being my guest, you and I go back for donkey years. So
all I'm saying is that the line
we've never had an antagonistic relationship.
Introducing is anyway. All right. So I just want to get something clear. You have denied that you're not saying that Africans must perpetuate their support, or the community must perpetuate their support for the PNC.
I'm not talking about that.
You're not talking about that. So
that's not a part of it.
You see nothing wrong with a black
Indian
African woman, African man joining the PPP and poison them. You see nothing wrong with that.
Here's something. We are dealing here with a particular example of trauma.
All right.
And its response. You guys are seeking now to take my one example.
No.
Generalize.
No, you said Bond.
No, but
did what he did. You said Bond did what he did because he has trapped African people have a post-slavery, and you got to expect these things in them.
And you were speaking of the entire community.
Bond in that.
Different people in the community, as individuals, in instances, and the community at large, in other instances, may manifest a response to the trauma they have experienced. The trauma that I'm speaking about in this particular case is the trauma Bond has experienced, not because of
the village movement.
Not because of the village movement.
But why can't it be because of survival? The man got a charge. But why can't it be because of common sense? A policeman
let me take it back, Freddie.
A policeman charge you.
Let me take it back.
They fine you 50,000.
I have.
And you go and buy a barbecue ticket for me.
I've entered into this discourse by saying there's something called
post-slavery trauma.
Post-slavery
inherent in African Guyanese
syndrome.
Inherent in African Guyanese.
That's inherent
in African
Guyanese.
They may be live with it right now, 2025.
And there are particular features of that in the Guyanese Africa.
And I have given examples in terms of the employment and things like that, of how the community, the trait that has come true in the response to the trauma. So I've given a general example in that regard.
Which you negativize, but it may not be a negative trait. No. Looking for being educated.
I didn't say it's a negative trait.
No, but you traumatized.
It's a response to trauma.
But how doing something to elevate yourself from being
because you have what is happening.
Caribbean produced 2 Nobel Prize.
You have been confronted with a situation.
In Africans.
You may come out of that response to trauma triumphantly.
But trauma is the determinant.
Trauma is the determinant.
All right. Now let me get specific.
I see you smiling broadly.
Let me get specific.
I wonder there's a Freudian guilt.
Let me get specific. You said Bond praised Ali, and then you give a specific example that Ali went to Mecca and he refused to entertain the NDC chair.
No, I didn't say that. I said he told the people in Mecca he has no intention of meeting
and that leadership. And you said that was against the Constitution. You said
that's also
all right.
The president don't have a choice.
Let me give you a specific example. When they before I go there, do you think that the PNC? Do you consider the PNC a representative of the community?
2 things. I don't know why is it that there is this tremendous effort to bring the PNC into this.
No, because you said the criticism of PNC leadership.
Right.
Part of what we
let me tell you what he said. Let me tell you what he said.
Part of what we're discussing today also springs off of what David Hines said.
No, but let me tell you what he said.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked him how was Bond hurt the African community, he said Bond said things about certain PNC members, and it is assumed that the PNC is representative of African Guyanese. And then I use the word acrobatic. So he is saying that the PNC is coterminous with African Guyanese.
With the community.
In Guyana, not only is it coterminous,
the PNC is coterminous with African
Not
Guyanese.
only is it coterminous, but if one looks at the statistics in terms of elections, then this could be very evidential.
Voting for a party means that party is coterminous with a national ethnic group?
We are a plural society.
Mm.
Plural society, we have different ethnic groups. It so happened in Guyana, in its plurality, it is also manifest in the country's politics. In that one ethnic group tend to vote for one party, another ethnic group tend to vote for another party.
So how did PPP lost the majority in 2011? How did PPP lost the majority in 2011? Or how they lost in 2015?
No, two things. Indians are not a majority, that is one. And everything we say is relative. Nothing we say is absolute. It doesn't mean every single Indian votes for the PPP and every single black votes for the PPP.
But then the theory becomes fluid.
No.
For you making the theory
doesn't become fluid. The theory does not become fluid. Because phenomena are defined by the major element. So, for example, the West Indies as a community very often is associated with ancestry in Africa. Why? Because the majority of West Indians are people of African descent. It doesn't mean there aren't Indians in the West Indies, there are Portuguese in the West Indies.
No, that I think is a bad analogy.
The PNC,
mm-hmm.
right?
Is by and large
of
the community and for the community.
Of the community.
And for the community.
You got a lot to explain. You got to explain how the WPA with Walter Rodney. You got to explain.
I explained that.
You explained the PNC lost 5 parliamentary seats in 2005. You got to explain.
I refer you to something I wrote when I was at IDS. The political culture of Guyana through the prism of class and race. And that explained the Walter Rodney phenomenon and what happened at that time. So I have, in fact, attended to this issue. You can bring up. So I'm referencing that. You may want to.
Was Walter Rodney referring? Walter Rodney's response was it one of trauma?
No. I'm not going to answer the question. Because
you have to answer.
I don't have to answer the question.
You have to answer because you've been postulating the TV for thousands of viewers.
I don't have to answer the question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The reason why I don't have to answer the question is I have a general theory that I refer to. Let me ask my question.
Mm-hmm.
I have used that theory to speak to the issue of Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have paid attention to Bond and his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me here to speak necessarily to Rodney
mm-hmm.
under the assumption that I have addressed my mind in the same minutiae to Rodney as I have to Bond. So if you call me back tomorrow, I may go and I may do some research and may come back and say, well, Rodney, yes or no.
So Bond was well researched and you feel at liberty to...
I am at liberty.
Okay.
But do you realize what he has done? The fact that he is not going to answer me about me. He can pick any example of a black person because of their own reason, because of their own thing in their family or what. And he attributes it to a trauma, and that's the working out of the trauma. Yeah. So Joe Hamilton, Odinga Lumumba, Patrice Chase Green, Gillian Burton, all of those people.
Some of them I can tell you what their trauma was.
But they have trauma.
Yes.
And the African Guyanese.
That we can tell you.
So it seems to my mind, once a black person leaves and go to the PPP, they have trauma.
That is not, no. See, that is where you are jumping.
I asked about Gillian Burton.
I asked
about Patrice Green. I asked about Nobinga. They all went over to the PPP.
It is not going to the PPP. It is what the response is. Now, there may be instances where the response is going to the PPP. Right? Maybe that may be the response. There may be other responses.
So what exactly?
So don't tie me into this thing about PPP and PNC. I am going there.
What has...
No, you've explained that with
you
Bond.
You explained it in PPP
Bond,
and PNC context.
You said Bond had the trauma, and that trauma catapulted him to the PPP.
Yes.
And I'm asking
that is his response.
I'm asking where Joe Hamilton
African leader.
But I have not generalized the case of Bond. As you guys are trying to generalize it by saying that if somebody of African descent got a trauma, they don't go to the PNC or the PPP or Indian go to the PNC. You are generalizing something that I have particularized.
But your particularity is situated in a general theory of post-slavery trauma.
Theory, but you can only...
Gillian Burton had the trauma,
you can
bops the PPP. Odinga Lumumba had the trauma, bops the PPP. Patricia Green had the trauma, bops the PPP.
Freddie, you're
Joe Hamilton had the trauma, bops the PPP.
You're disappointing me, you know. Because we are dealing here with either an inductive or deductive understanding of the evolution of things. Right? You cannot take one case, as I have given one case, without a plethora of cases to then generalize in that regard.
I am asking you,
right?
I'm asking you for an explanation of Gillian Burton, Rodney. I'm asking you.
I am saying to you that I'm not prepared, not having a forethought on those persons.
So,
to comment.
I get you.
Okay, we stayed long in this thing.
I get you. But just before we move on, let's go specifically to David Hines. David Hines, I guess, had because if we use Bond as an example, he had a general trauma, as you spoke of the village movement.
Who had a general trauma?
James Bond.
I never said James Bond had a general trauma.
He's a victim of trauma in a particular way.
The village movement.
He hasn't had a general trauma. James Bond has a specific trauma.
No. But
which is symptomatic of the general trauma.
From what you say, he had both a general and a specific.
James Bond has no general at all.
But you spoke of the village movement.
I have said, I gave the village movement as an example of a trauma that the people of African descent have had.
That perpetuates and permeates to the point where
it becomes part of the DNA.
Hold a moment. Yes, all of that is true.
All of that is true.
All of that is true.
You did the research on that.
Except to say
this. That in the specific case of Bond, I'm not relating his trauma to that village movement story. I'm relating his trauma to the theory of trauma.
But James Bond, being a member of the community,
has to be all inclusive.
No. Hold on, Freddie. James Bond, who's a member of the community, and the community share that historical traumatic what you call hand-me-down experience.
The community has had different traumatic moments and experiences.
Right. And James Bond is a member of the community.
James Bond is a member of the community. And in this instance, I am particularizing his traumatic experience.
So you're saying that this experience has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. One
can deal with the case. We are dealing with the case by on the basis of a case.
Can I ask you something? If a man or a woman say the PNC is a no good party that has no morality, is that an indictment of the race of African Guyanese?
If a man
or a woman say, I don't like the PNC, they consist of people who have no morality, will never have any morality. Is that a condemnation of African Guyanese? You hesitate to answer that?
No, but he said that earlier.
I have to think that it is. He said that it is?
With respect to Bond. He said it is with respect to Bond.
Because let me say this. In the Guyana context, in the Guyana context, there are a lot of things that are said insidiously about the PNC. About the PNC that are insidiously criticisms of the people of
and it goes to the other side. It's like possible. What Amanza Walton just said about Indians. So it goes about that. It is possible. The spokesmen for the opposition or African Guyanese have said things about East Indians. But you haven't answered the question.
Mm-hmm.
A man driving down the ferry and he cuts up the PNC. They're no good people, man. They're no good people. They can never be good. They ain't got no morality. Never got morality. Is that
he may not necessarily be saying that as a consequence of a trauma.
No. Is that an indictment? No, of a trauma. Is that an African Guyanese in a ferry say them PPP people? I would never like them. Them PPP people could never got any goodness in the heart. They were lost set of people. Is that an indictment of Indian people?
It may well be given the composition of the PNC.
So it's the same thing with the PNC.
It may well be a composition.
So the same thing with the PNC. If the people say the PNC,
we should move on because our views may never your views were made. Everybody's seeing them, and the program could.
But I like the theory of genetics though.
It's not my original theory. Not my original.
I know people. I know E.O. Wilson has said that, and a lot of people have said that, and they run into problem because at the end of the day, the scientists are saying it's nature versus nurture. So you could nurture away the genes in people.
There's no homogeneous position on that matter. So the scientists are saying all the
operator hasn't signaled to me yet, so we got time. Let us probe.
Different things.
You want to leave this? You want to leave this?
No, I want us to move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Because I up to this point I cannot extract. Anyway, let's move on.
Don't use the word mambo jumbo. He said that just Swahili.
No, I didn't say don't use it.
No. I love the term actually. I love the term.
No, but
if it's Swahili,
it may be.
I might want to use it more.
No, but if you want to use it in a negative way, you could be using it because you have a trauma, and that's how you're sublimating your trauma.
No, it's just another. It's just a Swahili word that found its way into English.
Obia is a Haitian. Voodoo is a Haitian term. We shouldn't use that, right? It's insulting. You shouldn't say that the voodoo theory.
Freddie, I did not say you should not use Jambo.
Mambo Jambo. Listen, let's move on.
I just observed that you were using terms which have
I introduced this program by saying you're one of the most experienced person in Guyana. Nobody can doubt that. You've been around a long time like me. We're two dinosaurs from Watermanville, and we got a 1 age difference. Do you believe, I'm asking you now to take off your Epadaji hat, to take off your Burnham Foundation hat, and to take off your GCOM hat, and talk to me as an academic that I knew up to years ago at UG. Can an AFC, is it right for the AFC to make the condition that if they merge with the PNC for the 25 election, the presidential candidate must come from outside the PNC. Do you accept that? Do you accept that stipulation by the AFC?
I don't accept this stipulation. They reserve the right in a negotiated environment to make demands, but I can't necessarily justify their demands.
But if you were to ask, shall we give over the consensus candidate, or shall we bring it from our own, have it from our own womb?
Let me tell you what I have a position on this matter.
Okay,
so let me tell you my position. My position is, I believe in matters like a candidate for presidency, there should be process. I don't believe that there should be a subjective
process like a primary.
Things like those. I believe in those.
Okay.
So I'm not going down the road of a subjective negotiation who will be presidential candidate. I believe that our party or parties, in terms of the political practices, should be involved in things like primaries. And so I'm an advocate, even in the present situation, for a determination like that to be done through process.
And if the primary shows up, if the primary within the PNC shows up a particular name, that person should be the presidential candidate.
Well, this primary now, if it's two parties coalesce,
it got to be
then the process goes beyond a single party.
How the primary is going to work,
right?
If it's two parties?
Yeah, because AFC support base would not be as large as.
But it's not. You see, the process. I haven't specified the
process, right?
But I think there should be process.
There should be
For example, Granger's presidency resulted from process.
You think?
Yes. I don't think I know. What they did, Granger's presidency, was they had a lot of town hall meetings across this country. There were a lot of town hall meetings where the candidates spoke.
You mean Granger for leadership of the PNC? No. For the presidency?
Granger.
For the presidency
I think they had a presidential thing.
Granger became president. James Bond was one of the five.
Was one of
James
I remember
Bond,
that. Yeah.
Faith Hardin.
This for PNC leadership at St. George.
My friend. St. George's, yes, that's the place. It wasn't for PNC leadership.
It wasn't for PNC leadership.
Granger
what are you talking about? James Bond?
But it wasn't for 2015 either. It was for 2011.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And so, Granger was pulled over from 2011 to 2015, but there was a process in 2011.
There was a process in 2011.
In 2011.
And then after 2011,
are you allowing Vincent to confuse you?
I'm not confused.
No, I'm not confused.
There was a PNC leadership of which Greenwich lost by 12 votes.
But that's a different process.
A different process.
I know what you're speaking about.
That was an intra-party election.
Yeah.
But before...
And then Granger won.
No, that's afterwards. Afterwards, Granger won the PNC leadership then. Granger was not the PNC leader when he became the presidential candidate. Cobb was the PNC leader.
Right. And
process.
I think it was around that time when Winston Murray died.
Granger was the PNC leader. In 2010, he became the PNC leader and the four contestants were Granger, Carl Greenwich, James Bond, and Faith Hardin.
No. That's wrong.
When
you are wrong.
Vincent, when did you contest for leadership?
2006.
Just go to your smartphone and put Granger becomes PNC leader. Look, you have it there.
Granger became PNC leader subsequent to becoming the presidential candidate. And the presidential candidate, there was a process.
You have the smartphone there, Google.
Of town meetings. The people involved in those town meetings at that time, if I'm not mistaken, it was, Bond wasn't involved in that one. Bond was involved in the PNC elections, not the presidential one. The presidential one was Granger, Faith Hardin, the former Attorney General,
Basil Williams.
I'm not sure if Maurice, but let me
Murray was running for something at the time when he died.
Murray subsequently was running for lead of the PNC.
Could we go back to ask you with your experience? Who you have a name? You have a name in mind for the consensus candidate if AFC and
no, I don't have a name in mind.
You don't have a,
I believe in process, and I.
All right, quick question.
I'm prepared. Well, not prepared. It's not up to me. I'm not part of the party, but I believe in process, and I think that the results of process should be accepted.
You left the PNC in 2007, is it?
Yes.
Corbyn expelled him.
Corbyn never expelled him.
Why did you leave?
I left the PNC because I felt that there was a need for a new political culture across parties.
Which you couldn't offer.
Which I was offering.
Mm-hmm. And the party rejected.
And the party rejected. Mm-hmm. My problem was not only the rejection, but the manner of rejection. Mm-hmm. In fact, the manner of rejection was the greater problem in terms of my leaving the party. Mm-hmm. People became abusive to me and things like that.
And you would say that is your trauma?
Huh? That was traumatic, certainly.
Okay.
No, he's talking about the historical genetic trauma. No, he's talking. Aren't you talking about that?
No,
he's not.
He's not talking.
So let me ask you this question.
You're trivializing the word trauma, Vincent.
No, let me ask you this question. Mm-hmm. That's the point I was trying to make. That the word is being trivialized. That is why I'm asking that.
That's the problem. But let's also understand those moments of trouble.
Let's move on.
Not necessarily conscious moments.
Welcome to the world of psychology, Vincent. I didn't know you were a psychologist.
Now, why being such a senior person to the extent where you spent so many years in the executive and all of that, and you were running for leadership, why not stay and fight? Why pack up and run away?
These decisions are personal decisions. Mm-hmm. I was not prepared any longer to be a particle in an organism where the particle didn't manifest the chance of overcoming the rest of the organism.
Oh, I see.
Let me ask you, the way that the trauma that you experienced that caused you to leave, do you believe that same situation exists right now under the Corbyn leadership, in which people are being treated and feel the way you felt at that time?
The culture change, the culture you were trying to
elements of the culture are still present. If you read my letter in relation to the Amna Ali moment, you know, a lot of people read that letter and have not gone into the details of my letter. In that letter, I specified two things. I specified that Amna Ali had no moral right to say what she was saying because she was herself the author of that kind of behavior. But I also said that the incident provided the PNC with a moment to introspect because many of the people to whom she was referring were her products.
Her creatures.
Her creatures.
And
so I said this is a moment for them to introspect. And in introspecting, seek to overcome the problem that has persisted.
All right, I'm saying this not for you to respond, but what I take away from that...
But you will respond anyway.
Is that Amna was one of the persons responsible for your trauma. Let's move on. GCOM. Can you tell us something about this biometric thing? Why you were supporting it? I from the information I get, you're upturning all kinds of rocks and leaves and so on in GCOM, clearing. You literally upturning mountains to get the biometric.
You got a minute.
All right. It's very simple. For me, we have sufficient evidence to show that the human factor has been a negative impediment in our electoral process, the human factor. And I think we need to turn to technology to reduce the impact of the human factor on the process. One of the elements of the human factor is identification of the voter at the place of vote. The extent to which there's evidence that there's multiple voting, and this is an accusation that's been made by all of the parties over time, is the extent to which you need to put mechanisms in place to reduce the human factor. I feel that the introduction of technology, and in this instance, fingerprint identification, can reduce the human factor.
Are you convinced that that can happen before in time for the 2025 election?
I am at this time, there would be problems in terms of it happening for the 2025 elections at due date. But I am of the view that
if you hold over the election,
it can be done. And it's not unprecedented.
And you would want to hold over the election for how long?
Well, this will have to be dependent on how long the project will take. But I don't think the project will take that long to have a holdover into a year.
But you're forgetting the Constitution has to be changed for that.
No.
To introduce biometrics, you have to...
No, that's not true.
Right.
That's not
true. Made that quite clear.
Ralph is not the source of all knowledge.
You're not the source of all knowledge too. With this theory of trauma.
Neither am I. Two things. As it is right now, in terms of capturing fingerprints digitally, there's no impediment from a legal perspective. All of our regulations provide for GCOM to determine the manner in which they do registration and fingerprints are captured.
We have run out of time.
No, but this is unfortunate because really I want to make the point that there is no legal impediment to the identification at the place of vote using fingerprints.
But do you blame the government for not wanting to hold over their own term? Would you blame the current government
I don't think they've attempted to address that question. They've attempted to knock down biometrics.
You didn't answer the question, Vincent. It's a straightforward question. They don't want to go for their term. Do you blame them? We got a straightforward question.
They say hold the elections under the current law, the current
and then you deal with it,
and then we deal with that for any future election.
This same party, which is saying to do that, had a different disposition in 1992. So I'm saying
that is how politics work.
We gotta go. One thing I want to ask you is every year you celebrate your birthday, George Club.
I've never celebrated my birthday. I celebrate my birthday once at Georgetown Club.
Right, I was there.
When you were there.
But then you had another one this year.
I had another one this year, Theatre
Guild.
And what I do, I use my birthday as
to raise money
for the Burnham Foundation.
Freddie, are you sure we can't go over time? They got questions on
go over time when
people.
Because I can come back.
This is an internet show,
No. The operators have to sit down there.
I can come back.
You can come back.
I can come back.
Vincent, thanks for being there. And I say you've gone into a new field now. Genetic biology.
Why not? Why not?
You were watching an interview with one of Guyana's most known names.
Controversial.
Vincent Alexander, GCOM Commissioner, Chairman of United Nations Decade for People of African Descent, Guyana Chapter, and President of the Burnham Foundation, and not to forget one of the longest serving experienced Guyanese in terms of social studies, sociology, politics. We will see you on Wednesday coming.